Hey guys, we're on lesson 16, and here we go. I'm going to enter into a discussion of some really basic compositional ideas, and I think it's gonna help a lot. So let me see. So the first idea, I'm sorry, I've got them cataloged. I've got them cataloged over here. So we'll be back. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to deal with is what's called the steelyard. And the steelyard is this. I don't know why it's called the steelyard, but this is what it is. There's a fulcrum, and the fulcrum is a point on which two things are balanced. And then you have a little thing over here which is balanced on it, and then over here, because this guy's a little bit closer over here, you can have a bigger thing, and that creates a kind of intuitive sense of balance, okay? And so let's look at that again in a more obvious way. Okay, so here we've got a plank, and this time I want to put my fulcrum right here, okay? And now I can put a big thing over here, and to balance it out over here, I think I can get away with something that small, okay? This is the underlying concept. It's a kind of intuition that will become a compositional tool for us. And so if we look at it, like let's look at it as a composition. So let's say that we have an image like this. And into it, we'll position a fulcrum. And let's say that my fulcrum, I want to position my fulcrum around the 80-20, okay? So here's the 80-20. And over here, I want to put something heavy and big, and over here I want to put something small, okay? And so because this creates an intuitive sense of balance, so we're going to take away the things that make this notion overt and imagine that there's a person standing in the foreground over here. And let's say he's shooting. It's like a gunfight, okay? He's a cowboy. And he's shooting into the distance here. Remember, our fulcrum is right here, and then way over here, we've got this little guy, and he's shooting too. And notice how this composition manages to be balanced. Even though on one side it's so small, and on the other side it's so big. Okay? So this is the idea that we're going to be working with for a little bit here, okay? So that's not a page yet, so this is going to be your first page. So this time, what we're going to do is, as usual, we'll divide our page into 4 somewhat equal segments, okay? And I'm going to start over here. I'm going to do one composition over in this zone. And the way that I always want to do a composition is I would like to suggest the crop. It kind of gives me a zone to kind of to land in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with ellipses, but my ellipses are going to be, they're going to be large on this side. I'm going to have a situation that's going on over on this side where my ellipses are like really large. There's just some structure over here that's based on these really large ellipses. And then, but over here in the distance, that is really small. They could even be connected. It could even be like this, that I could work my way in a gradation from one end of this composition to the other end. From this tiny energy to this huge, so long as I have a sense. And now I'm going to move my crops. Okay, I'm going to do another one over here. And if you're understanding this idea, you're absolutely free to play with it with the same kind of ellipse, but a different, a different movement on it. So over here is a structure composed of really thin ellipses, and I might connect them through a line of action. And again, remembering the crop is and look at how it is that this composition somehow works. Like this composition is, I'm not in love with the structure. I'm gonna attempt a structure that I could be more pleased with over here. You see, I love this little structure right in here. And how is it that I come forward with a sense of balance? I like that. When I am framing, when I'm looking at building frames, I'm actually going to change this frame. I just had a kind of idea. The negative space left there is really pretty exciting. Okay. This time, I want to try to reverse my weight pattern. Looking for an interesting crop. And this is a nice example of what the Steelyard can be. One more. I want to like search for one more. Now that we've been practicing ellipses just for so long, and we just do so many of them, it's really possible that they could become a very commonplace structural tool for you. Obviously useful for building a cylinder, but one thing that I like about this form of composition is I just see I see like chasing. I see a lot of action in this format. Okay, so that's our page one. So leaving the ellipse, let's consider the curve. Okay, so our curve, when we generally build our curve, quick division of our page. When we generally build our curve, we start with these. We're often looking for, we've got 2 points. That we're connecting. And the other curve that we work with is we have 3 points. Okay. And these are widely open for interpretation. How it is that you come off of one seems to affect how it is that you come onto another. And this opens up all kinds of dynamic shape patterns that they insinuate volumes and forms. It's always great to just throw a couple of curves down, crop it, really purely based on instinct, and see what you have. See, how does that feel? What did I come up with? This will really grow you as an artist and as a designer, as well as your drawing. So over here, let's enter from the curve. Let's start to talk about the steelyard, okay? And I think we've got about between 12 and 15 forms of composition that we're gonna go through. So if it was that I was to take one of those curve forms here and express it large, considering the possibility of, say, a fulcrum there, and then I'm going to take on this side and work my S form. You see, the S is too big. It's strange the way that you just feel it. That was a thing that just happened for me. It's the first time that happened for me. That if I have one of the dots and another, and if I just, it's like a quick move, like that. And my sense is that I'll be spinning back, but it's the first part of it is very powerful. And the part that we normally do does that, but this was different. This was... In abstract expressionism, one of the tenets was action painting. The idea was that the gesture that was in your body would be apparent to the person looking at the painting, meaning the feeling of making the gesture, the feeling that you had while you made it. So if you make a line, I'm cropping this, just like looking for a nice composition, and I think that is a nice composition and line. So if I make a line like this, if I go, and that line had a feeling, this like fluid feeling, when a person looks at that line with its fluid feeling, they in some way, they have that feeling. You know, they mirror me through the line. By mirror, what I mean is that they take the feelings that are in me, they come through this line and they imitate them. Like for instance, if you draw a smiley face, it's hard to not smile at the smiley face, right? And so that's a not so subtle version, that's a really obvious version of what I'm talking about with this line. What I'm talking about with this line is, it's kind of subtle. The way that you feel when you do it is the way that a person will feel when they look at it. Again, notice in this that there's a fulcrum and that there's bigness here and smallness here. but that it's balanced, and it's that balancing. Okay, this time I want to put my fulcrum here again, but this time I'm going to put my S over here. And I'm just going to start to play with possibilities on the S. The computer is being really strange. Okay. And say that the fulcrum is here, and I'm looking for a piece that I can get in relationship, a way to balance. That feels wrong. It feels too big. It also feels misplaced. And I'm just referencing my feelings. There's the balance. It's a great volume. It's possible that it could be smaller. In our last linear composition. This time, all the three preceding, I was kind of leading the composition deliberately. This time I'm more going to follow, because I know the idea. I know that one side wants to be large and one side wants to be small. It's based on curves, and it's based on a sense of a fulcrum. And so I'm free to add and subtract as I feel things working or not working. So the curve of the large seems to be intensely interesting, and now I'm looking for a way to complement it, a way to balance it on the far side of its image. And I might start to sketch in like where I see this image leading to. I certainly can't cut it off right there at that moment. I could cut it off below it or above it. Like say I could take it here. It's a shame to take it there because the top part of this curve is really the most beautiful part. And so I think I'll take it there, and I think I'll take it there, and I'll come back this way. And I'll clean and clean. And here's this like really exciting curve. And I'm looking for my fulcrum, which is, say it's here. I can put it where I want it, but where I put it will affect what can balance it, right? We're starting to find it. I'm starting to find a balance. There we go. Okay, page 2. On to page 3. So we worked a line, and now let's try shape. It's one side of the fulcrum. And then the far side. It's interesting. This one is clearly the one that we care about. That's clearly the one to watch. But compositionally, it's the Steelyard. We'll go squares. Looking for a balance. It's really interesting how something so tiny can balance something so large. I wonder, my thought is, I played with a really different aspect of the fulcrum in this one, the Steelyard. Bean shapes. And this is going to be compound shapes. So starting with a triangle. One of the concepts in art is appeal. And what it means is it means that you're making things that appeal to people. And so either the things that you make have appeal or they don't. And one of the ways to make things have appeal is to sort of stick close to the underlying shape that makes it. Like, so say here's a triangle. Sorry about that, guys. But if I wanted to augment it, I could start to change it. But I'd like to keep the basic triangular dynamics. Like, you see how this is a shape based on a triangle? It has the appeal of the triangle that it's based on, but it's just not that triangle, right? So that's one way to keep appeal. Okay. Okay. So that's our third page. Here's our fourth page. Okay. So we've been doing these compositions with flat shapes and with lines, which means we're going to do a little structure. Okay. So here's some structure. I'm looking for a place for the fulcrum. I'm looking for a bigger shape on this side, a smaller shape on this side. A way that they have a sense of interrelationship. Okay, I'm going to make cylinders, I think. And this one is so stagnant. So say I have this giant cylinder over here, and I'm looking to have a tiny cylinder over here. It's interesting how they can balance each other. Here's an interesting idea that as the diameter of the ellipse gets smaller, these lines get more vertical, and as it gets bigger, these lines have a greater convergence. We'll work with a cube. Here I have this giant foreground cube. And I want to balance it across the picture, looking for like what is the scale of a little cube that can balance that bigger one. And I think that does it. I'm wanting to have this cube really only have two sides because I want for it to feel like it's in the distance. And this one has three sides. We'll do a ribbon. And then I'm balancing it with a smaller ribbon. That one looked too big. Just trying to search for a way to activate this curve more. I think that's what I'm going to do for the curves. Cones. I was looking for a way to get cones into the steelyard composition. The whole point of this corner composition is just to get some bigger shapes, bigger cones, relating to some smaller ones across the composition. So that one seems too big. And that one seems too close. Okay, last page. Mark it in the middle. And for this, I want for your, we're gonna move into figuration. I want your figures to look something like this. Just like two legs, the pelvic region, the belly region, the chest region, the head, the arms, which have two parts, and the hands, okay? So it doesn't have to be a fancy figure. You see how this figure is really flat? So this is the figure that we're going to use when we start to look for compositions, all right? So say over here, we're looking for a composition, and I've got a guy. And I don't know what he's doing. He's starting to look to me like a World War I guy. I'm doing some World War I type stuff. Okay, so there's this character. And now we need to decide on another one. And what happens if we put him right here? Again, the idea is of a fulcrum. So what I have in this picture, and this like quick composition, is I have a bigger person, more of a presence of a person, over on the right side, and on the left side I have a smaller presence, and I'm just playing with a ribbon that connects them and extend it onwards. I think it's a kind of an interesting idea. It's almost like kind of Dr. Seussy if I did these things. Very strange image. Okay, guys, that'll do it for today. Nice job.